The year is 2004 AS6. Person research team crosses into the eastern Congo basin. Standard equipment, standard protocols, a planned 3-week survey. They return in 11 days. 3 of them never speak publicly again. 1 submits a report so heavily redacted that only the date remains legible. And the lead scientist, when asked in a 2009 interview what they found, pauses for 7 full seconds, then simply says, "Some places don't want to be understood." No follow-up expedition has been approved since. What they encountered has never been officially named, never been classified. And according to every institution that funded the trip, it never happened. But the Congo basin is still out there, unchanged, waiting. And tonight, we're going in. The Congo basin covers over 2 million square kilometers, most of it never formally surveyed. Most of it never mapped below the canopy level. Scientists who have studied it describe not a single ecosystem, but dozens layered, isolated, and in some cases completely cut off from the outside world for thousands of years. What evolves in isolation, without interference, without observation, doesn't always evolve the way we expect. Number 10. The river that runs backward, the Congo River, is already one of the strangest bodies of water on Earth, the deepest river ever measured, reaching depths that still haven't been fully charted. But in certain stretches of the northern basin, something happens that hydrologists have never been able to fully explain. The water moves in 2 directions at once, not in separate channels, not at different times, simultaneously. Upper currents flowing one way, lower currents pushing the opposite direction, in a pattern too consistent to be turbulence and too sustained to be tidal. Models have been proposed, none have held. What makes it stranger is this: local communities along these stretches have never fished them. Not seasonally, not historically. The prohibition isn't religious. It isn't superstition passed down through story. When asked, elders simply say the water there is. Not for taking from. No one taught them that. It appears to have always been understood. Hydrologists who've studied the affected zones note one additional detail that doesn't appear in any formal publication. The reversal is most pronounced at night. During daylight hours, the current behaves almost normally. Almost something beneath that water is operating on a cycle. And whatever is driving it has been doing so long enough that the people living beside it stopped asking why and simply learned to stay away. Number 9. The forest, with no birds in ecology. Silence is never natural. Even the most remote forest on Earth produces sound, insects, canopy movement, the constant low frequency of bird activity. Birds are everywhere, which is why what researchers catalogued in the Eastern Basin in 2011 stopped an entire survey team in place. E-zone of approximately 200 square kilometers, healthy canopy, intact vegetation, no signs of disease or chemical contamination, producing 0 bird activity, no calls, no movement, no nesting, not a single species passing through. Ornithologists found nothing wrong with the environment. The trees were healthy. Insect populations were normal. There was no reason, biological, chemical, or atmospheric, for the absence. And yet the absence was total. If you were standing at that boundary, this is where the silence would stop feeling like quiet and start feeling like a warning. What deepened the unease was everything else. Mammals tracked via camera trap were observed approaching the zone and turning back. Not gradually, immediately, as though crossing an invisible line they had no intention of crossing. No predator inside. No toxin identified, no explanation logged, because no explanation existed. The zone remains. The birds have not returned. And no one has spent a night inside it. Number 8. Unknown megafauna footprints. In 2008, a geological survey team made a discovery that was quietly removed from their published findings, pressed into the soft ground along a riverbank, a set of prints, large enough that the team's photographer initially assumed they were equipment depressions. They weren't careful casting, confirmed they were biological. They're left by something moving with weight, with purpose, and with a gait no team member could immediately identify. The prints exceeded the size of any catalogued African animal, living or extinct. Wrong shape for elephant, wrong for hippopotamus. The claw structure, 3 distinct anterior points, matched nothing in any known regional species database. What the team noted in their private logs, but not their official report, was the direction of travel. The prints crossed the river directly, through water deep enough that whatever made them would have been nearly fully submerged. Nothing known to science in that region crosses water like that. The casts were submitted to 2 separate institutions. Both acknowledged receipt, neither published analysis. And here is the detail that has never been adequately addressed. The prints only appear after heavy rainfall. Never during it, never before it. As though something that stays hidden uses the rain as cover and the mud afterward as the only record it was ever there. Number 7. The chemical lakes in the northern basin. There are 3 lakes that don't behave like lakes, unremarkable in appearance. Still water, normal surface temperature, no visible signs of disturbance, but beginning at approximately sunset, they emit gases colorless, largely odorless, and within 40 meters of the shoreline, fatal. Researchers initially attributed it to limnic eruption, a known process documented elsewhere in Central Africa, dangerous but explainable. Except limnic eruption is unpredictable, regular, triggered by seismic shifts or sudden pressure changes. These lakes run on a schedule. Emission begins at dusk. It subsides before dawn, night after night, season after season, with the regularity that no geological process produces and no limnic model accounts for. And all 3 lakes, separated by kilometers of dense jungle, operate in near-perfect synchronization. No explanation has held. No source has been identified. Local populations have known about these lakes for generations. They don't warn visitors that the lakes are dangerous at night. They warn them that the lakes are awake. Number 5. The leads beneath the canopy. This is where the nature of what we're dealing with begins to change. The previous discoveries exist within the boundaries of the unexplained, strange, unsettling, but physical, measurable. The kind of thing science can approach, even if it hasn't answered them. What survey drones captured in the Western Basin is something different. During routine nighttime flights in Faye imaging equipment, recorded structured light patterns moving beneath the canopy. Not atmospheric reflection, not bioluminescence. The movement was directional, coordinated, and consistent in a way passive biological sources don't produce. The patterns held formation, they changed direction. They appeared to respond to the presence of the drone itself. No settlements exist in that region, no roads, no human infrastructure within 80 kilometers. In Faye, a separate expedition, different team, different equipment, flew the same coordinates. They captured the same patterns, same formation, same behavior, 11 years apart, identical. If you were standing in that operations room, watching both recordings side by side, this is the moment the explanation you've been constructing quietly falls apart. No official body has claimed the lights. No researcher has published on them directly. Whatever is moving beneath that canopy has apparently been doing so long enough that it no longer considers the sky worth watching. Number 5. The tribe that erased itself abandoned settlements are not unusual in the Congo basin. This was not that. In 2017, an anthropological survey team documented a settlement of significant scale, structured housing, cleared agricultural land, tool caches organized with a specificity that suggested long-term habitation, cooking areas still laid out, cultivation rows still visible, personal objects arranged as though lives had been interrupted, not concluded, no remains, no graves, no trail of departure, no evidence of conflict, disease or flooding. The Team Cross referenced every colonial census, every missionary record, every modern demographic survey available for the region. The group that built this settlement does not appear in any of them. No language sample matched known regional dialects. No tool design corresponded to any catalogued cultural tradition in Central Africa. The humanity advanced enough to cultivate land and construct permanent structures with no recorded contact, no documented existence, and no explanation for where they went. Then the detail that reframed everything. The vegetation inside the settlement was still dying, not long dead, still in the process, as though the last human presence had occurred within the previous 10 years at most. They didn't vanish into history, they vanished into now, and whatever they knew, whatever they saw, they took with them completely. Number 4. Sounds below 10 Hz. There is a frequency of sound the human ear cannot hear. Below 10 Hz, infrasound. It moves through solid ground, through water, through walls. You don't detect it as noise. You detect it as feeling, unease, disorientation. The inexplicable sense that something is present that shouldn't be. In the southeastern basin, seismic monitoring equipment began registering infrasound pulses rising from a specific patch of ground, approximately 3 square kilometers. The pulses weren't random, they arrived on a cycle. Every 72 hours, consistent to within minutes. No geological source was identified. No fault line beneath it. No underground water system of sufficient scale. The ground, by every visible and measurable standard, is unremarkable, and yet something beneath it is producing a structured, repeating signal with the regularity of a mechanism. What the team noted almost as an afterthought, the wildlife data camera traps showed consistent avoidance of the zone. Animals didn't pass through it, they routed around it. The avoidance predates any human recording of the pulses. It predates the monitoring equipment. It predates any scientific presence in the region at all. Whatever is generating that signal, the animals knew about it long before we did. And they made a decision we haven't yet had the honesty to make ourselves. Number 3, the quarantine specimen. In 1997, a team conducting cave surveys in the northern basin retrieved a biological sample from a chamber 40 meters below the surface. What happened next is where the record gets strange. The sample was transported to a laboratory in Belgium under standard containment protocols. Within 72 hours of arrival, it was placed under government quarantine. The agency involved has never been identified. The legal instrument used has never been made public. No findings were published. The researchers assigned to initial analysis were redistributed to unrelated projects within weeks. When contacted years later, none agreed to speak on record. One said the work had been concluded. Another said it had been stopped. They were not describing the same thing. For over 2 decades, the specimen existed only as an absence, a quarantine with no public justification, a study with no conclusion. Then in 2019, a letter written by a laboratory assistant present during initial analysis was leaked through a Belgian academic forum. 7 paragraphs of ordinary procedure, administrative frustration. A project abruptly terminated. The final line read, "What troubled me most was not what it was. It was that when we received it, after days in transit, sealed, in the cold, it was still reacting." The letter was removed from the forum within hours. The sample's current location is unknown. The quarantine has never been lifted. Number 2, the mapped structure underground in science. Anomalies are expected. The world is imprecise, and instruments find things that require explanation. What ground-penetrating radar returned from the Western Basin was not an anomaly. It was a structure 40 meters below the jungle floor, beneath undisturbed soil, beneath root systems centuries old. The imaging revealed a geometric form 2 kilometers in diameter, symmetrical, precise, with internal divisions regular enough that 3 separate analysts reviewing the data independently used the same word. Deliberate, no natural process produces this. Not geological folding, not erosion, not subsurface water movement. Whatever is buried down there has a shape that required intention to create. The findings were submitted, received, and then the conversation went very quiet, very quickly. What surfaced later, through archival research by a historian unconnected to the original survey, was a Belgian colonial map, dated 1908, covering the same coordinates. The structure appears on it, not as an anomaly, not as a question. Drawn with confidence, labelled in small, precise lettering, accompanied by a single instruction that required no elaboration then and requires none now. Do not excavate. Summonen mapped it over a century ago and thought only one thing worth writing, which means either no one has dared since, or everyone who has never came back to tell us what they found. Number 1. What the returning scientists won't say everything before this point has had a shape to it, a place, a sound, a structure, something external, something that can, in theory, be approached and studied. This is different. Since 1990, 14 documented expeditions pushed into the deep interior, different institutions, different countries, different questions. They came back. Every single team returned with at least one member who would not, or could not, speak about what they encountered after 30 or more days inside. Not classified, not bound by agreement, simply silent. As though the words for what they saw no longer existed. Psychologists called it trauma, isolation stress. Reasonable explanations. Then 3 of the affected researchers, from 3 separate expeditions spanning nearly 2 decades, agreed to neurological imaging. The scans showed identical changes in the prefrontal cortex. Same region, same pattern. 3 people who never met, never compared notes, entered the Congo a decade apart, and came back with the same alteration written into their brain. No toxin does this, no known pathogen, no psychological event leaves a mark this specific. But here is what has quietly unsettled every researcher who reviewed the data. The changes don't look like damage. They look like something learned.